I was 8 years old when we first moved into the house on the edge of the forest. My parents had their doubts about buying a house with a backyard bordering the forest. They were concerned about wild animals rummaging through our bins, potentially harming our dogs, and worried that one of us might wander too far into the trees and get lost. But it was affordable. My dad enjoyed the seclusion, my mom loved the house itself, and my siblings and I were thrilled about playing in the backyard and exploring the forest. Our first indication that something was amiss was that our dogs were absolutely terrified of the forest. They never ventured into the forest for any reason. If a toy they'd been playing with ended up beyond the tree line, they would refuse to retrieve it. When one of us ventured in, they would anxiously pace until we returned. On occasion, we noticed the dogs staring at a spot in the forest in obvious distress, sometimes growling or barking, but we could never see anything there. My brother once tried to carry one of the dogs into the trees to show her there was nothing to fear, but she wriggled out of his grasp and sprinted into the house in a panic. If we were in the backyard as darkness fell, we sometimes heard noises that sounded like someone was walking through the forest, with sticks crunching underfoot and branches being pushed aside. When we called out, there was no response, but if we shined a flashlight around, we would occasionally catch a glimpse for just a split second of something that looked like a person walking around in the dark. My parents quickly banned us from entering the forest after dark, and even during the day, we weren't allowed to go out of sight of the house. My sister's bedroom window looked out at the backyard and the forest beyond, and she remembers looking out her window one night and seeing a shadowy figure standing right at the edge of the backyard. She said there was something strange about it, like it wasn't quite touching the ground, it was a little too tall to be a person, and it appeared distorted. She was convinced it was staring at her. She called for our dad, saying there was a man in the yard peering through her window. When he rushed outside to chase off whoever it was, she continued to watch the figure. It didn't move away, but when the light from our dad's flashlight passed over it, it suddenly vanished. We regularly heard knocking at the back door at night, with no one there. Our parents thought it was teenagers playing pranks and eventually stopped bothering to open the door. However, one rainy night when the knocking was persistent and agitated, my mom pointed out that someone might need shelter from the heavy rain outside. When she opened the door, there was no one there, and there were no wet footprints on the porch. The knocking continued the entire time we lived there. It would occur several times in the span of a few weeks, then stop for months, then start up again. My parents eventually installed a security camera, and there was never anyone at the door. The camera wasn't entirely useless, though. About 3 years into our time there, my brother began experiencing night terrors and sleepwalking. When he went sleepwalking, he would always exit through the back door and start walking toward the forest. My mom, being a light sleeper, would hear the door open and would run out to retrieve him before he made it into the forest. After the third or fourth time it happened, my brother asked to see the camera footage because he wanted to see how he looked while sleepwalking, thinking it would be amusing. The footage showed him walking out onto the porch, pausing as if listening to something, shaking his head, and reluctantly walking forward as if being pulled or guided by something. One evening, my dad was in the backyard, and he heard my sister calling him from the forest, seemingly in distress. Believing she had ventured into the forest and fallen or gotten hurt, he ran in and started calling out to her. However, he quickly realized it was too dark to see her, and he couldn't pinpoint where her voice was coming from. He told her to wait where she was while he grabbed a flashlight. When he ran back into the house for the flashlight, he saw my sister inside, safe and completely unconcerned. At that time, my dad hadn't shared his experience of hearing my sister's voice in the forest with us. So when I heard my mom's voice coming from the forest months later while I was outside with the dogs one evening, I didn't question it, despite the fact that I had seen my mom inside recently and hadn't noticed her passing me. My mom was calling to me, claiming her sweater had become entangled in some branches and she needed my assistance. As I walked in, the dogs started barking, alerting my dad, who saw me through the window wandering into the forest. He came outside and called to me, and I explained that I was helping Mom. He yelled back that Mom was inside and I needed to return to the house as quickly as possible, which I did. Following this incident, my parents had a fence constructed around the backyard and began searching for a new place. During the time between the fence being built and our move, the situation deteriorated significantly. We heard knocking at the door more frequently, as well as tapping on the windows, as if someone was circling the house and testing every window. We often heard scratching and scraping sounds on the fence and voices beyond it. My brother's night terrors became more frequent, and one night, my mom didn't hear the door open when he went sleepwalking. He woke up standing at the fence, staring into the forest, with the dogs barking at him. The last morning we spent there, less than 4 years after we moved in, we woke up to find the back door wide open, and the security camera footage showed it slowly swinging open on its own. Since moving out, my brother's sleepwalking has ceased, although he still experiences night terrors and suffers from severe anxiety. A few nights ago, he called me out of the blue, and after some small talk, he asked me if I thought the door being left open that final night meant that whatever was out there had finally gained entry. He was trying to make light of it, joking about getting exorcised just in case something had attached itself to us all those years ago. But I think he's deeply affected by everything that happened. I know I still am to some extent. I get nervous around dark wooded areas. I don't know what I believe was out there in the forest behind our house at night, but I have a feeling that if given the chance, it would have swallowed us whole.